Thinwood Walls, Chapter 18. I woke the next morning to the sounds of my parents. They were sitting on the edge of Mom's bunk in the early light from the window, holding each other, sighing and sobbing, and shaking their heads, and murmuring to each other in Japanese. I looked around our shabby little room and tried not to tell myself that this was what Mike had died for. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. Was grandmother lying so still next to me, doing the same? I wondered if there was a way to make a trade, my life for Mike's. Maybe if I died and it would bring him back, my parents wouldn't be so heartbroken, and I wouldn't have to be either. But even with my mind clouded with sleep and sorrow, I knew my parents loved me too, and I knew a trade wasn't possible. Eventually, I did fall back to sleep. When I woke, my parents were gone. To church, grandmother said. I was glad they hadn't asked me. I wasn't happy with God. I had nothing to say to him. Not now. I no longer felt like a little kid. And maybe Mom and Dad saw that. Maybe they were allowing me to make my own way, at least for a little while. I got up, empty as a hobo's pocket, and went to breakfast with grandmother. I felt people's eyes on me. Some of them came up and said they were sorry to learn about Mike. I watched their mouths move, but I heard the sounds of battle. I didn't know what to say back except thank you. The day dragged on. I walked to the canteen with Mom, read a Life magazine, dug for shells. Anything to get my mind on something less painful than Mike's death. But I still kept picturing him over there, dying in some strange cold place. Alone, maybe. The soldiers hadn't said exactly how he died, so my imagination took over, choosing a lingering, cruel death one minute, a quick, merciful one the next. But none of them was merciful. I felt as if my heart were going to shatter like that long-ago marble. I went to the fence that night with Dad. The stars came out, bright, mocking, daring me to make another wish. So I did. I decided to go for broke. I wished for safe and peaceful place for Mike. I wished I could see him again someday. I wished we would get to leave this prison soon. I wished for a new place for us to live where people judged us by what we did instead of how we looked. Dad was quiet. Mike helped save many lives, he said finally. Yeah, I said. I could see my breath in the cold air. I wish someone would have saved his, but it was too late for that wish. That night, after the lights were out, and I thought everyone was asleep, I got out of bed and dressed and took my marbles out to the field where May and I had played so many times, where Mike and I had played before he left. In the moonlight, I dug a hole with the shovel Sandy had given me. I buried the bag of marbles deep in the ancient soil and packed it down on top of them. Dad was waiting for me in the shadows when I neared the barracks. I was glad to see him. I didn't feel as grown up just then. He put his arm around me, and without words, we went inside. We went to bed and listened to each other breathe. The next morning, I woke up early, before anyone. I tried to get back to sleep, to recapture a sweet, lifelike dream I had had in the night. But I couldn't sleep. I kept reliving the day before that, when first light came into the room. I wrote of those days. I skipped school. My parents said nothing. That afternoon, letters came in the mail. One for me from May, one for my parents from May's parents. Good news, finally. A wish granted, finally. We have found a sponsor for you, May wrote. There is a job for your dad and a place for you to live. We would be leaving Thule as soon as final arrangements could be made with the government, moving to Ontario, Oregon, near May and her family. A few weeks and we would be gone. My heart felt lighter. A few weeks and we would be gone. My heart felt lighter, up from the bottom of my chest. I would miss Ray, but I had gotten used to missing him. May would be my friend, and maybe there were other friends in Ontario I just hadn't made yet. I would miss the White River Valley, but I had a feeling it wouldn't miss me. I saw sad smiles on my parents' faces, life in grandmother's eyes. Mike's death would be with us forever, but maybe he had died for something after all. I wanted to believe that, even though I didn't feel it. My parents wrote back to May's parents, thanking them for everything they had done. I wrote back to May. I told her about Mike, how I missed him. I told her I would keep my promise to teach her to whistle, but the rest of my letter was filled with thanks. I walked to the post office and mailed the letters. When I returned to our room, Grandmother was gone, doing laundry. Dad and Mom were also away, talking to reporters for the Star about an article on Mike, talking to Reverend Sakamoto about a memorial service. I stoked up the fire in the stove and stood back, looking around the little room where we had spent more than 2 years of our lives, reminding myself we had only a few more weeks here. Mike's belongings still sat in one corner, untouched. I stared at them for a minute, considering, wondering if anyone would care if I looked. Should I let my parents be the first to go through his stuff? But I decided that if they wanted to be the first, they would have looked by now. They would have warned me away. So I went to the corner and picked up the envelope and package and brought them to the table. The envelope didn't contain much. The handkerchief with the river and trees Grandmother had made for Mike, the stone she had given him, my old school picture, some of the letters we had written to him, the St. Christopher medal. Everything was dirty, water-streaked, wrinkled and bent, and dog-eared, except for the medal. It was shiny, as if someone had rubbed it clean, and I wondered why. Was it just mud that had been scrubbed away? I put everything back and clasped the envelope shut, pushing it aside. I turned my attention to the package. It was wrapped in brown paper, taped and twined. Government issue packaging, I figured. I slipped off the twine and tore away 2 layers of paper. Inside was the red badge of courage, dirty and battered. Under it was another book, Mike's journal. I picked it up and thumbed through it, back to front. The pages were swollen and dirty and blank. Blank. All blank. Until I got to the beginning. At the top of the first page was a date. October 24th, 1944. Below the date was a poem. On the next few pages, over the next few days, he'd written other poems. Some in pen, some in pencil, all of them streaked with grime. I nearly smiled at the thought of Mike avoiding his journal for so long, as if it were an extra helping of brined liver. I nearly cried at the thought of what monster under the bed horrors finally drove him to start writing in it. October 24th. Death in the day, fear at night. Hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. October 25th. Freedom is a blind man coming through a minefield. Hear his tap, tap, tap. October 26th. Soldiers fighting sleep shiver under drenched blankets. Frigid sun rises. October 28th. Blood spills cherry red from brown bodies. Do colors matter in the end? October 29th. When freedom walks here, Nisei can head home at last. When will they be free? When they die, I said to myself. When they die. I read Mike's words again and again until my throat was thick with sadness, until the lines blurred over. Then I sat with the journal open in front of me, waiting for my family to come back. Mom and Dad and Grandmother needed to read what Mike had written. Dad returned first. The burden of talking about Mike weighed on his shoulders, making him look older. But when he saw me, a smile crossed his face. I remembered his brave words when he'd just missed Mike's leaving. I will enjoy Michael when he returns. I stood and gave him Mike's journal. He wrote something, I said. He handed me a small sack. The cloth was pure white and cinched at the top with orange string. An exchange, he said. You will need these now. Weighing the distantly familiar contents of the sack, I waited for him to start reading Mike's words. Then I uncinched the string and looked. Marbles. New ones. Dozens of them. Surprise, and as thoughtfulness, took my breath away. These I would keep. These were free of the memories I found more bitter than sweet. I watched Dad's face as I slipped my hand into the sack and let the smooth glass flow through my fingers. Thank you, I said, grateful he didn't think me too grown up for this gift. He nodded, eyes on the page. Thank you, Joseph. He pulled a chair to the stove and sat with his coat still on, reading and rereading. I went to my bag and got out my journal. I sat in a chair next to him and added some words. When he finally closed Mike's journal and set it carefully on the floor next to him, I handed him mine. No one else had read it, I said. I am honored then. His voice was watery, his eyes were spilling over. He moved his chair closer to mine and opened the journal. He read, the expressions on his face changing like the seasons, while my attention shifted back and forth between him and my marbles, while I removed each one from the sack and examined it in the firelight, imagining it as a pearl. I wondered what he was thinking, what he would say when he finished reading. I thought about May, about games of marbles in a different place, a free place, about leaving Tule Lake. I thought about Mike's dream for my future, the advice he had given me about school and college and writing. I thought about my dream of the night before, the one I wanted never to forget, the one I had just written of in my journal. In the dream, Mike and I are back in our green valley, walking the banks of our lost river. I breathe in the cool spring air, smell the fresh smells of new life sprouting from trees and shrubs and ground. We toss a fir cone back and forth, laughing, until darkness sends us home. The end.